Greetings, everyone. P. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monsters Den. It is the Monsters Den Horror and Monster Film Hall of Fame 2024. First time we're ever doing this. We've been talking about it for a while. We finally got our shit together, and it's happening tonight. We want to thank everybody who voted for the list of nominees. We're going to get to that in just a second, and then we're going to, towards the end, we're going to go through our five winners. Come on, Jamie, let's see it. There we go.
There, I was like thinking, I got something. Hold on, left over from New Year's.
There we go. Prop,
In the house. Jamie
prop
Lancer
master
is
in the
here.
house.
Dan Brown is here. Craig Kaminsky is here. And all the way from Scotland, he's up really, really late for us once again. David Gallagher's in the house. Chris Allo is absent tonight. He is away on a business trip for work, but we will take care of all of his nominations and all that kind of stuff today. So Chris is here in spirit. And so how we're going to work it here. So basically, just so everybody knows, we each nominated five films. All right, we're going to go through each person's going to talk about the films they nominated. We put that all into a kind of like a poll, a little survey thing. Everybody who watches the show hopefully had a chance to vote. We had quite a lot of people, just under 2,000 people vote, which is kind of neat. We've got five winners that are going to go into our Hall of Fame. This is the Monsters Den Hall of Fame. These are great films, right? The films that didn't make it in will still be up for nomination next year. All right, as well as other stuff, other films, right? We also, at the end of the episode, we also decided to each nominated one horror icon that's going to be like kind of like a lifetime achievement vote. So we've got five horror icons that are automatically also going into the Hall of Fame. We'll reveal those at the end too as well. These could be actors, directors, special effects people, writers, producers, whatever. It's all up for grabs. So we'll get to that. That'll be at the very end. And we're going to start. Davey is we're going to go Davey, Craig, Dan, Jamie, and myself, and I'll list Chris's as well. Just talk briefly about your five nominees each. So Davey, you want to get us started?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I feel like I have to be a bit more official since we're doing a Hall of Fame.
Yes. Our best behavior tonight.
Indeed. No fucking about, no messing around. So my first nominee was Nosferatu 1922. Simply, it was between that or the other Titan, which you can probably imagine, of the silent era, shortly before it, Dr. Caligari. But I just feel that Nosferatu is it's really the first straight adaptation of Dracula, despite the name change for copyright reasons. And it's essentially the most modern, recognizable horror film. A lot of Dr. Caligari is what we'd now consider a psychological thriller in a lot of ways. But Nosferatu is indistinguishable from what we know as horror today. So it's very much the birth of horror. And it's a beautifully artistic film, a fascinating film with a terrific central performance from Max Schreck. So yeah, had to be represented. My second pick was The Bride of Frankenstein, to represent the universal cycle, which again I felt should have a voice, a recognition as a cycle. And the reason I went for Bride of Frankenstein rather than, say, Frankenstein itself was, first of all, I would never have picked Dracula. I just don't think it's a great film. But I do think Frankenstein is. The reason I picked Bride over it is I think it's actually an improvement on an already great original. But it's very, very important to the horror genre, because before that, when you had a successful film, you did something like it. So Dracula is a success, we'll do Frankenstein. But this is the first time where, in a big scale, they said, let's get everybody back together, the actors, cast, and crew, and let's do a sequel. Let's do an actual sequel. And without that, we don't have franchises. And how many franchises we ranked in this channel alone? It's one of our bread and butters to do the ranking videos of franchises. So all your Halloweens and Fridays and whatnot, everything comes back to that first decision to expand one film's universe and lore, which you get with Bride of Frankenstein. And of course, you have another icon in there with Elsa Lanchester's Bride joining our already wonderful cast of the original. My next pick, Psycho from 1960. It gives partial birth to the slasher genre, of course, but it also establishes that you can make truly great films that would cross over to a larger public that wouldn't be to them just horror films. It was from, of course, Hitchcock, who at that point was already a world-class and world-renowned director, not just from film, but of course television with the Alfred Hitchcock Presents show. And Psycho essentially is him coming down into the gutter and joining us, which is wonderful. It's a very ahead of its time film for its rather reprobate nature and some of its overtones and indeed undertones. I don't think we really need to say too much about any of these films, to be honest, apart from why we thought they needed to be represented. Exorcist was my fourth pick. We did an episode on it a few months back when William Friedkin left this mortal coil. So if anyone wants to check that out, please do so. And my final pick, Hammer's Dracula from 1959. And again, the reason I picked that rather than, say, Frankenstein is because it's the film that essentially saved Warner Brothers. It's such an influential film that it's really where we establish also the gore, the Kensington gore of the horror movement overall. Before that, there just wasn't mainstream blood in horror movies. Hammer introduced that. And also titillation becomes very much overt in Frankenstein. It's hinted at in, in Dracula. It's hinted at in The Curse of Frankenstein. But in Dracula, or I think you call it the horror of Dracula over there, don't you?
Yep.
It's very much explicit. And the vampiric nature of the penetration of the bite becomes much more a sexual act, which is something that we'll see in a million films going forward. And it really establishes that quintessential Hammer crew of Cushing, Lee, Jimmy Sangster writing it, Terence Fisher producing it and directing it. So James doing the score. James Bernard doing the score. So it's all your favorites from Hammer on top form. So I wanted to pick something from each kind of cycle that I feel represents horror best and should be day one ballots. And those are my five. So Nosferatu, Bride of Frankenstein, Psycho, Exorcist, and Dracula from Hammer.
Yeah, and that film arguably gives you Christopher Lee's most iconic performer or character, right? And what could be the greatest on-screen Dracula of all. You know, you could say that it's
think
either
so.
Lugosi or Christopher Lee, right? Depending on what you like. So.
I'm a bit contrarian with that. Lugosi wouldn't make my top five. I think he'd rather have me, to be honest. But regardless, Christopher Lee is the best. So, but let's not overlook his work in Police Academy 7, Mission to Moscow. But I'm sure we'll cover that in a future Hall of Fame.
You never know. You never know. All right, Craig, over to you.
All right, my top five. My first choice was Halloween from 1978, directed by John Carpenter. Film everyone, I think everyone and their mother has seen, I think, over the years, and it has been imitated, duplicated many times with sequels and reboots all through the year, all through even today. And in addition, the movie is just very well made for the time. Carpenter's use of Steadicam at the time, I think, was a breakthrough, and just with not the first slasher movie probably, but definitely the most, I think it was probably the most notable over the years, and people who don't even like horror, I think, enjoy Halloween. So that was my first choice. My second pick was Alien from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. For me, it's a movie that is many things combined into one. You have science, it's a science fiction movie, it's a horror movie, it's a haunted house movie, perfectly cast with actors who look the part. This is one of those movies, if this was never made in 1979 and if it was done today, it would look totally different. You would have beautiful women in there and chiseled men as the workers on the Nostromo, but they are perfectly cast in this movie. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but this may be might have been the first movie where the monster gestates inside of you. It's not trying to take over the earth or trying to destroy a city or something like that, where you are the host of this, and it will emerge from you, which is uh, uh, even some of the start of body horror at the time. And again, a movie that's been duplicated and ripped off so many times through from filmmakers around the world, and that still is a franchise that is continuing to this day. So, Alien, my second pick.
Just ask Roger Corman all about that, right?
Yeah. My third choice, I went with Curse of Frankenstein from 1957, and I opted for that over the Universal Frankenstein from 1931. And one of the main reasons is that it's in beautiful, glorious color. Seeing Christopher Lee as the creature with his green face when he gets shot. I mean, it's visceral. And Peter Cushing's performance as Dr. Frankenstein, he is a complete scumbag in this movie, and it's just uh, reprehensible, in his quest to have the creature. And I really love this movie, and uh, if given a choice of a Frankenstein film, I prefer the Hammer version, Curse of Frankenstein from 1957. My fourth choice was Night of the Demon, also from 1957. Uh, I just really enjoyed the cult aspect of it, and the performances that are given, and the payoff at the end with the iconic demon at the end, which just I can just picture it now. It's just so cool looking, even in black and white. Pete, Chris, and I were able to see this on a big screen a couple of years ago at one of the Exhumed horror-thons, and it was really cool to see. And it was the night, yeah, excuse me, yeah, the Night of the Demon version, not the American shortened Curse of the Demon version that we were able to see on screen. So that was my fourth choice. My final choice was Blood and Black Lace from 1964, directed by Mario Bava, probably one of the first Giallo movies, and again in just beautiful color, and the use of the faceless killer going around stalking these beautiful women at this boutique, and the use of just flashing lights, and you have a mystery, and it's a horror, and who done it, all wrapped up into one. I just think Blood and Black Lace is could be a perfect movie in my opinion, and it's worthy of inclusion. So those were my five choices for the fans to vote for.
So influential. Great choice. Dan.
Okay, my five choices. I'm going to start with my first one was King Kong from 1933, kind of an updated version of Beauty and the Beast, written by Edgar Wallace, or at least the early treatments of the script written by Edgar Wallace, who was a well-known mystery writer, known throughout the world, directed or produced and put together by Marion C. Cooper. And it was one of those darling monkey movies. But it's not. The thing about King Kong is just such breakthrough, where Willis O'Brien had done special effects in The Lost World, a number of stop motions, The Beast of Slumber Mountain, and even prehistoric stop motion films, the 19 teens. He goes all out with King Kong, done with total stop motion, which inspired countless special effects actors. And to this day, the story, you're all well aware how it goes. This film, if you watch it for the first time and you are, quote, jaded with TikTok or anything new and exciting, it's in black and white, you're still going to sit there and go, oh, wow, this is pretty intense. It's an action film from beginning to end. The acting is great across the board. It put a lot of people on the map, and it is a classic amongst classics. And there's no way that can be nominated in any capacity as a great award-winning film. My second one Directed by Bob Clark, who brought us Porky's and brought us A Christmas Story and all kinds of bizarre films. Comes a 1974 slasher, if we wish to call it, or Stalker in the House, Black Christmas. I saw this film in Japan, had no idea what it was, and I went in to watch it. I didn't even know Andrea Martin was from SCTV, was one of the actors, and of course it was Canadian-based production, and it played off of the old urban legend of the babysitter and the killer upstairs, about a slasher a psychopath who locks himself into a girl's sorority house at a college before Christmas break, and everybody's leaving and people just start disappearing. It is creepy. It is scary. You never see the killer. It had really set the basis for any type of killer in the house films, which also, it was so inspirational that Bob Clark, the director, had mentioned to John Carpenter, Urban Myth, that he wanted to make another film based on another holiday in which there would be a slasher. And I think Carpenter got inspired and took the ball and ran with it and brought us Halloween in 1978. But Black Christmas, aside from the director who did it, who has hands in many things, a journeyman director, it still stands up to this day. Number 3, the film that put zombies on the map, the film that took it from the back burner boogeyman to the seedlings of a genre that became just a juggernaut, and a series of a genre that's a juggernaut, and that is Night of the Living Dead by George Romero. The quintessential guerrilla filmmaking on a shoestring budget. I mean, inspired by things such as Invisible Invaders. And I think, well, his favorite film was Tales of Hoffman, but by other films, he was inspired. Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. And he turned, which was the zombie who was a shambling hunk in a jungle, generally being used for revenge labor by people, by a zombie master. Well, these are zombies. This is where grandma dies, comes back, and, well, she wants to eat your face. So it brought a whole new slant to this. One of the great things that inspired not only the whole zombie genre, but many directors across the board. It's bar none, probably the film that set the bar for everything, and that's Night of the Living Dead. Once again, the great George Romero. The next one, I went along with what Davey said, which is The Exorcist. Possession films, I mean, really, they weren't really played upon that much unless you went to Haxan in the silent era, about witchcraft and a few other witchcraft films. And then all of a sudden Rosemary's Baby comes along, and there's still something kind of surreal about that film with Satan. But all of a sudden The Exorcist comes into play. And this is where it takes it and brings it forth as an actual physical threat, and not just a manifestation of your imagination or a lot of cloudy and smoke and mirrors. It's in your face, and it's possession of a child. And it's a film about faith. It's a film about having conflicts with oneself, about fighting against good and evil, but most of all, the guilt we go through in our lives. It goes on many levels. Incredible film, once again. Set the stage for anything from The Exorcist of this one, The Exorcism of that one, any type of Exorcist film, and nothing has ever come close to it with the simplicity with which it pulls it off. So that's The Exorcist. My last one, a film, I would like to put this film in a canon of films. In the late 1960s and 1970s, a book came out about that era of filmmaking called Of Raging Bulls and Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, about the rebellious film movement in the late 60s and early 70s, starting with Easy Rider by Dennis Hopper and introducing directors to the genre such as Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, this whole radical rebellious filmmaking. Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre really falls in that same category as films such as Last House on the Left. This was the rebellious era of horror, including Night of the Living Dead. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where it succeeds on so many levels, it's once again, we've all been on road trips. You've all been kids, you've been teenagers, something like this, but being caught in an area where you don't know where to come out of, and all of a sudden there's a guy showing up with a chainsaw, a sledgehammer, a completely dysfunctional family. It was out there. And the great way he accomplished this, if you really think about it, you never see any visceral blood in this film. It's simulate, you can't see it, but you feel the pain, you feel the horror, you feel the claustrophobia. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, once again, he was the benchmark for many psychopathic, whatever, weapon wielding, brought to light a number of other characters that have become household names. So that being that, my fifth one was Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Tobe Hooper in 1974.
Yeah, another highly influential movie. We've got a lot of them today.
That
Jamie, you're five.
that dance scene at the end of the movie with Texas Chainsaw is I mean it's it's glorious. I go onto YouTube just to watch that 30 seconds of him pirouetting in the street to the sunset with the chainsaw. It's awesome.
I think the scene where you see the tension building up, and there's the bones and the feathers, and something's not right. And the one scene where the guy goes by sliding, it opens, he gets hit in the head, and that's it. And you're going like, that hits you like
It's not a fucking review show.
Huh? What's that? What was that?
You two just pipe down. Give Jamie his turn.
Don't worry.
It's so hard not to talk about these films, right? It's crazy. They're so good.
Pete, get a mute button up for those guys.
Coming to get you, Davey.
All right, Jamie, what do you got? What are your five?
All right. I don't need to talk a shit ton about these movies. We all know these movies.
Moving on.
Dracula 1931. You got to put the first Universal movie in there. I'm sorry. There's no Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman. It starts with Dracula, right? That's kind of like Iron Man, right? It's the first one to kind of open that universe, if you want to call that a universe. Exorcist. Everyone hails it as the scariest movie of all time. You got to have the scariest movie of all time in there. Even though you don't personally think it's that scary, it's hailed that way. Jaws. You got to have Jaws. I mean, I'll get into that later. Night of the Living Dead, because of what Dan said, its influence is still around today with The Walking Dead and all the stupid spin-off Walking Deads and all the zombie movies that are coming out a dime a dozen. And Psycho. Davey said Psycho that kind of started the slasher a little bit. And man, it's Psycho. Got a wedge in Psycho, right? Maybe not. We'll find out.
Yep. All right, my picks, Exorcist, for one. My favorite film of all time, and it still creeps me the fuck out when I watch it now. It just does. It's so visceral, and it's just so amazing, and the acting is so great. I've also got the first Frankenstein film from 1931, Boris Karloff, and I would agree 100% with Davey. I think the sequel is just as good. It's different, but it continues on. It was the first probably ever truly successful sequel. Who was doing sequels back then? Now they do sequels for movies that tanked, right? So why not? But yeah, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein absolutely deserve to be nominated. Got to have both of them. It's just such a wonderful performance from Boris Karloff, a breakout performance. And the film is just so raw and dark and dreary and cold, and I just love it. I watch it every year religiously. It's so good. As Dan mentioned, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, got to be here. I still remember like it was yesterday, the first time I saw that movie when I was a kid, and I was just kind of like, I stayed up late to watch it on Cinemax, and I was like, whoa, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's so like grimy and real looking, and just yeah, total 70s classic, as Dan mentioned, just influenced so many other boogeymen to follow. Really, really great. Black Christmas, arguably, along with Psycho, one of the first slasher films ever. Certainly one of the first, there's a stranger in the house type of thing, right? When they didn't really know there was a stranger in the house. Excellent performances. I think the way they portrayed the killer was genius. Well, the voices he made when he's like, I'm calling on the phone. I mean, it's just so freaky. Really, really great. And then my last one is the original Godzilla, Toho's black and white classic. Just one of the, and it's got to be the Japanese version. It's got to be the original. Forget the Raymond Burr Americanized version. That's just pales in comparison. The original is just so powerful and so frightening and terrifying. It really, really is. And, maybe it was Japan's answer to King Kong for sure, but as a film, it's legendary. And look at how many sequels we've gotten of that. Sequels and offshoots and reimaginings. And man, Godzilla has become a true icon. We could have nominated Godzilla for our icon, guys. I mean, we could have done that, right? But yeah, those are my 5 picks. Chris has picked Dracula, or The Horror of Dracula, whatever you want to call it, from Hammer. Chris is a huge Christopher Lee fan. Not surprised he picked that. Also, Dario Argento's Suspiria, probably Argento's most beautiful film. Also a really creepy film. It comes in the middle of like all these other giallo films that he's doing, even though this is not really that, although some people like to lump it in there. Great artistic achievement. Creature from the Black Lagoon. Let's go back to Universal. So the Gill Man, one of the most iconic of the Universal creatures, but this, of course, comes a little bit later than a lot of the other films we're talking about. Dawn of the Dead, the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, one of the most respected zombie films of all time, of course, by George Romero, a classic film taking place in that cool-looking mall, right?
Monroeville.
Yep. And then last but not least, Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, right? It's kind of cool that we have a Lucio Fulci film in here because he's got a lot of ones that are deserving. The Beyond was the 1981 film set in Louisiana, all about like a gateway, the portal that opens up to hell, right? All sorts of weirdness and gore and just a batshit crazy film, but we all love it. So yeah, those are our nominations. So is everybody ready to hear the winners? So let's talk a little bit about that. So we've everybody has been voting. We've asked folks who watch the channel and specifically the show over the last 2 weeks to vote for their favorites. People could vote as many times as they like. We saw a little bit of moving around as far as the top films over the course of the 2 weeks, but most of them kind of stayed the same, although we had one that kind of rose up in the ranks over the last couple of days, over last weekend, as a matter of fact. And but for the most part, the top one stayed kind of the same for the most part. So I'm going to share a little PowerPoint that I put together here.
Now I feel like I'm at a work meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. There you go.
It's our quarterly
Can't be a work
projection.
meeting. I'm wearing trousers.
Monsters Den.
Here we are, the Monsters Den Horror Monster Film Hall of Fame. Here are the winners, folks. So coming in at number 5, and again, what we did was we tallied up the number of votes, right? So number 5 was Lucio Fulci's The Beyond from 1981. We were all kind of surprised. So this was one of Chris's picks. So apparently we have a bunch of Lucio Fulci fans here. Of course, like I mentioned, this was released in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
All right. English language film produced in Italy, starring Catherine McCall, David Warbeck, Sarah Keller, Antoine St. Jean, and Veronica Lazar. Set in Louisiana, different kind of setting for a Fulci film. But as you can imagine, all sorts of ghouls and zombie-like creatures and witchcraft and all sorts of things. But again, this whole concept of like a gate to hell opening up. It's set in like this house, right? This old rundown house. And in the basement, there is somewhat of a gate to hell, so to speak. So yeah, The Beyond was your winner, coming in at number 5. Number 4.
Yes.
Jaws.
Now we got something worthy of first ballot. Jaws. Look, The Beyond, this is the thing. First ballot, first year, this is supposed to be a boring show. No surprises. Like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Elvis, Chuck Berry, Beatles, boring. There's how The Beyond got in there is beyond me. But we do have Jaws, which I think it deserves it because it's the first summer blockbuster. And how many times have you described the movie and said, it's Jaws, but with fill in the blank? You know, it's Jaws, but with an alligator. It's Jaws, but with piranhas. It's Jaws, but it's in space. So it's set kind of a standard there with that type of monster movie there. And I think it's just as much a character study as it is a horror monster movie. I mean, you got Brody, Quint, and Hooper together. Those characters, I would watch those characters just go on a regular fishing trip and watch the whole movie for 2 hours. Them just trying to get bluegills. It would be a great movie. But you throw in Spielberg and a shark, and it's you got a winner. One of the best movies ever made. And what's funny is came out in 1975. I call this a 5-star movie. It's a top 10 movie for me. It's not even my favorite movie that came out in 1975. Crazy.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like you
Yeah,
mentioned,
Jaws.
often imitated, but never quite duplicated like this.
Never, because you don't have those actors, Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss, and that director and those characters.
And
What's your favorite film of
everybody
75?
knows that, and everybody knows that
What's
John
next?
Williams score. Everybody knows the John Williams score,
Oh,
no
the
matter
score,
no
yeah.
matter what. Even if
Oh
you,
yeah, dun everybody. When you're in a swimming pool, everybody's done that to a buddy or something. Dun dun.
Mhm.
And it dawned the sharksploitation.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll see you in the
You
summer,
wouldn't have
folks.
the Shark Exorcist without Jaws. Think of
That's
that.
right.
Right.
Think of that.
For
So
our
Davey
second
had asked,
annual.
David asked what your actual favorite film from 1975 is, Jamie. What is it?
Cuckoo's Nest.
There
Oh,
you go.
okay, there you go. There you
Back
go.
when they made movies.
When
great
they
thing
had
about
the
Jaws-
stars, Dan, they had the stars.
That is stars. God,
Jaws
Georgie
was not a
Ness.
big budget film either. I mean, Jaws was like put together on a fairly modest budget. So when you really think about it, man, what they were
The
able
patience, though, of the filming out in the water because boats would be coming and everything, and they'd have to redo it. And
Yeah.
The monster is something natural. It's a fish. It's a shark. It's
Yeah,
not
people
like
say
a
the
monster.
shark looks fake, but when you watch it, you really don't care, do you? You look
No.
past it.
And the whole thing with the shark, does not work, really ends up working for the movie, that you don't see the shark constantly, that you see the yellow barrels instead,
Yeah.
and it builds up tension perfectly. And Robert Shaw was jobbed for not getting at least a nomination for supporting actor.
Just for the Indianapolis speech
for this
alone.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And do you know why you jump when the shark jumps out when Brody's dishing out the what's it called? Chung or whatever?
Because there's a big fucking shark coming towards me.
No, because it's the first time the shark appears without the done it. You're not prepared.
He's just
It just
there.
comes.
It basically boils down to the fear of the unknown, fear of the water. What's below?
Oh yeah, I'm terrified of the ocean.
But
Yeah.
it's not even just. I mean, the characters are much copied. That triumvirate of characters, but even the ancillary characters next to them. How many characters are in films can you call the Jaws mayor character?
Yes.
The official who doesn't want to close the place down and then that leads to more shenanigans, more killing, and more whatever it is. The Jaws mayor character is in everything from Ghostbusters to Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Murray Hamilton, he nailed that too.
Yeah.
You hate him.
Great. He was great.
And a great sports jacket that he was
Oh,
wearing.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All right. Number 3. Dawn of the Dead from 1978.
Oh, yes. Well, as I said earlier about Night of the Living Dead, where George Romero actually launched a genre, birthed a genre, took something. Some things came along in the 70s. There were some interesting zombie films that came out, some things that kind of slipped through the wayside. Not many. I mean, things like The Corpse Eaters from 74 from Canada. Of course, Don't Look Midnight, it was at the Manchester Morgue, aka Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. But Dawn of the Dead, pretty much what Romero began with, this cemented it. This said, this is it. This is his genre. And I think from this day forward, he was considered the godfather of the zombie genre. Something maybe in some respects that kind of cornered him, but this is actually one of his strongest films, on basing on his satire of consumerism, on the general, this came around at a time when the mall was starting to come into strong prominence and just started destroying the whole thing. And like the lines in it, when there's no room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Why are they here? Maybe it meant something to them in a previous life. It's just genius. That why they're there. So this was his greatest political or satirical statement, maybe other than Knight Riders, but it just set the pace. To this day, it's been attempted to be copied of people being trapped in places. I mean, there's a cult following in itself as far as the full length, taking every possible second of the film and putting it into a film and making an extended cut. And oddly enough, even with the extended cut, a couple of flubs, it still doesn't destroy it. It really is well crafted, and there's deservedly so. Maybe, and it's an important film, and I'm glad that George has gotten his place in the Hall of Fame, or at least his film for now.
I still think it should have been Night of the Living Dead before Dawn of the Dead, I think you
Yeah.
got to go in order,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to complain about Dawn of the Dead getting in. I mean, a Pittsburgh guy filmed in Pittsburgh, so I'll still, wave the terrible towel on that. Woohoo!
Well, it's
So
Mr. Rogers going to get in next year. I mean, for fuck's sake.
I'll
Just
wave my
because
terrible towel then too.
it's a beautiful day in the
It's really
neighborhood.
something how in this movie, how in Dawn of the Dead, how there's long stretches of the movie with no zombies or anything, and you really don't care because it's the character, you really come to care about the characters in it, and you feel bad when, at least for a couple of them, when bad things happen to them, and when they're invaded at the end by the biker gang, and their paradise is taken away from them, and it's just it's a deserving classic that again, I think people even that may not like horror can appreciate the how well that it's made when viewed.
And they look terrible, those zombies, don't they?
Yeah.
They're just painted blue, because they had so many extras and so little money that they were just slabbering it on as they walked through the doors. Tom Savini and his crew were just taking 10 seconds per extra to get it done with absolutely no budget whatsoever. But you can look past it again because the film's so good. And the characters are not the Jaws characters. They're not big characters, memorable Quint-like characters. Peter, Flyboy, they're not these massive characters who you're going to recite word for word. The Indianapolis speech wouldn't work in this film. It's not this. It's a bit more grounded. It's a bit more socio-realistic. As much as this sort of film can be. And that's where George A. Romero's genius is, that documentary style, without being an actual documentary. Unfortunately, we would see what it would be like later in his career when he did try to do a found footage version of one of these films and didn't work. But this is George Romero at the peak of storytelling, and it's so all-encompassing that the budget doesn't matter in the slightest.
It's basically a survival film.
And once again, the biggest threat is not the zombies, it's the humans.
Yeah.
It's the biker gang that gets things going. And on a side note, Flyboy David MG just passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
After being ill for a number of years or bad health. But yeah, he passed away a few weeks ago. So you fly, Flyboy.
Right. That's right. All right, number 2. Alien, 1979.
Yeah, that was one of my picks for my 4K.
Oh, look at him with his 4K. Jesus Christ.
And
La di da.
but again, as
Position.
as I said earlier, it's a science fiction movie. It's a horror movie. It's a haunted house movie. Small cast, perfectly working well together. You have your monster that you don't see terribly often, sort of maybe taking a cue from Jaws, that the quick glimpses that you see of the alien is enough, and there's jump scares aplenty in this, and surprises with Ash and with the creature itself at the end of the movie. I mean, it still gets me when the creature is taking when the alien's taking a snooze, at the end, and he just moves slightly. It's like, geez, I mean, I didn't see that coming, and I think it's just I'm glad that it made it into the top 5. It's very deserving, and yeah, definitely one of my favorites, and my favorite of the franchise. And even when this came out, I mean, geez, there were toys and games and things like that for this movie, for something that for a monster that burst out of your chest and everything. I still
A
find
rated R movie that we
a rated
couldn't
R
see,
movie. I still
but we
find
could
that
get the
baffling.
toys.
I still find that baffling. My brother and I had a Alien board game that we would play. It was kind of like Parcheesi. You had to get to the middle where the Nostromo was to escape, and each player had 4 astronauts and an alien, and then you could use your alien to eat the other your opponent's astronauts, and but just things like that for a movie like this, that it was that you could buy toys for it in a toy store is really something else. And Giger's design of the alien is just to this day, everyone loves and recognizes it. As soon as you see that, you know what it's from. So I'm glad that it's inducted into the inaugural Hall of Fame.
It's Ridley Scott at the peak of his powers.
Yeah.
Very early in his career, I think he peaked with this and Blade Runner in terms of playing to his strengths. I don't think Blade Runner is a particularly great film in terms of its script, but I think that Alien is in the scripting and in the directing and in the design and in the score. James Horner, was it?
Mhm.
Score.
Okay.
What a bloody supreme cast, all round. For even the smaller, slightly smaller parts, like John Hurt as Kane is only in there for 20 minutes, really. But wow, what a memorable scene that is. He even got my gig 10 years later in Spaceballs reprising the role, didn't it?
Not again.
But what just a masterful film, which relies on tension and patience, and it's a great science fiction film for about 40 minutes, and then it's everything that Craig just said for the rest of the film: a survival film, a horror film, a haunted house film, a monster film. It's seminal. It's a masterpiece. It's the only great film in that franchise, I think. Truly great film.
Yeah,
You
we
know
would
what's
also-
interesting about this film and a couple others that we just talked about, this whole sense of isolation. So here you're out in space where no one can hear you scream, right? Jaws, they're out in the middle of the ocean, right? There's no one around but them and the shark. What was the last
Dawn of the Dead, they're
Dawn
in the middle of the
in
mall, yeah.
right? Yeah. So it's all this feeling of the cast, however many there are, they're isolated with the, whatever the terror is close by, but there's nobody else out there to help them. So very
And
cool.
the Beyond had the plumber,
Yeah.
the poor plumber that goes just on a regular house call, and that poor bastard just, the worst flooded basement ever, and
Yes.
the awful things that happened to that poor plumber.
Yep. It's terrible.
It's got like great cast. You got everything, including Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, it's got everything. I think that wasn't it one of Sigourney Weaver's first major roles too.
It was her first
It
film.
was,
Yeah, so you got that. Yeah, Yaphet Kotto had been around mostly in a lot of Larry Cohen and Cross 110th Street blaxploitation films.
Well, he had been a Bond villain by that stage.
Right.
And she wasn't even the top billed person, in that movie. I believe Tom Skerritt
Tom
was.
Skerritt,
So
yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was a surprise that when she ends up being the final girl in the movie. I mean, it just has twists
Psycho
and
effect.
And yet you would never
but-
call her that, would you? You would never call Ripley the final girl. She's too above that. She's not.
yeah, she's too
she's not-
assertive and too smart. I mean,
She's
she's
this
not
is
a
an
damsel in
old-fashioned phrase, but
distress.
she's one of the guys.
Yeah.
They're all very much presented as that. Apart from Nancy Cartwright's character, she's supposed to be the antithesis of Ripley, really. Very much the opposite.
In reality, she was the inspiration for when Tom Savini remade Night of the Living Dead. Patricia Tallman played the sister, who was played by Judith Day in the original film as just somebody who was in a complete nervous breakdown. She was the inspiration for this kick. You didn't expect this just meek woman that turns into this kick-ass action hero.
We haven't mentioned Ian Holm. What a twist that is. An
Oh,
hour and
yeah.
20 minutes. We take it for granted now. Bishop is an android and whatnot. There's no suggestion until he is revealed as an android that androids even exist in this universe until it happens on screen. Marvelous stuff.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I agree with Davey. This was Ridley Scott's peak in that 2 or 3 year period.
And just all the set pieces inside that spaceship when they land with those big clunky space suits on and walking around. I mean, you the viewer are looking around. You still don't. It's like, what in the hell is this? Is that a giant guy sitting in a chair and with why is his chest open? I mean, and the corridors and the eggs with the mist over them. I mean, it's things that stay with you, and that you, the viewer, just take it all in and love it.
And the alien was played by Peter, who also played Predator, tall black actor.
Kevin
Peter
Hall.
Falk.
Kevin
Yes.
Peter Hall.
Let's just start that rumor. Peter Falk played the
And
alien.
then Tom Skerritt, he became the prototype for the beleaguered space captain. There was
Yes.
a certain
A
burned
lot
out
of those.
quality about him, like I've been on one too many missions and not enough cantinas. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean they're truckers in space.
Yeah.
They're working class
Yeah,
people in
they are.
space.
Yeah.
They're not Starfleet.
Mhm.
They
Good
are
choice.
people.
Now I got to go watch it again now.
Yeah, I should have
I
fucking
could
voted
watch
for
this
this
every month. I
Yeah,
could watch this every month. Yeah.
I'm now angry that I didn't shortlist Alien.
In
You know?
defense of Greg, when I saw that Alien was one of these nominees, I went out and ordered the 4K. I haven't got it yet, so just to make that there's two of us out there in the group.
Got to do it. Got to do it. And I saw this in the theater when it first came out, and it scared the crap out of me. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Wow.
All right, here we go. Our number one most requested. Da-da-da-da-da.
And the winner is
Well, it's about time one of mine actually made the list. Thank you. The Exorcist is, again, something we've recently done a video on, so I don't think we need to go on much more than the headline news here. But as my kind of thesis was on that video, a lot of films are creepy, a lot of films are scary, but you see the strings, if you will. You notice the filmmaking. The Exorcist is one of the few films in the history of cinema that feels evil incarnate. It feels like it's infected with evil. And I don't feel like I'm watching actors. I don't feel like I'm watching Jason Miller and Max von Sydow rehearsing the scene and then doing it. I feel like I'm watching those two priests going through hell trying to save a young girl's soul. It's a dark, serious film by a serious filmmaker, and again, at roughly the height of his powers, Bill Friedkin. So we've got, coming off the success of The French Connection, an Oscar-winning film, he chooses to do this, which just wouldn't happen much these days, where a filmmaker would win their big prestigious Oscar and then instantly go into a horror thing. But Friedkin chose to do that, and just mastered the genre straight away by not treating it like a horror film, treating it like a human drama with fantastical and evil elements. And everything about this film is in service of that main story, no matter how many slight tangents there might be. The cop, the other priest who checks in on things, is all in service of the story. There's not a wasted bit of footage in that whole film. A total masterpiece that I would have on my list, even if this wasn't a horror show. And we were just talking about top films that should be in a Hall of Fame first ballot. This would be there for me with Citizen Kane, with North by Northwest, with some Buster Keaton, some Chaplin, some Eric von Stroheim, some Godard. This would be there in that category for me. It's just so important to the language of cinema, to 70s filmmaking, to that generation, as Dan mentioned, the Easy Rider, Raging Bulls generation. And if people haven't read that book by Peter Biskin, they should do. There is a horror version of it called Shock Value, which goes a lot more into Toby Hooper, Wes Craven, by Jason Zinnemann. People should check that out if they're interested in 70s horror, certainly. But this is an important film in that era that we've talked about a lot of, especially when we did our non-genre faves. And we all had a lot from that kind of period of the 70s, a lot of De Niro things and Coppola things, and Pacino and Nicholson. This very much feels like one of those films. It's being taken as seriously as one of those films. It's not being treated as quote unquote just a horror. It's a masterpiece in every way, from performance, from sound design, to the use of that snippet of Tubular Bells that's used to perfection, which is nothing like the rest of Tubular Bells. People think, oh, I'll buy Tubular Bells, that's a nice Halloween album, and then the rest of the album's nothing like that whatsoever. Neither is Abaddon, but yeah, regardless. And again, it's the only truly great film in a franchise that still continues to this day. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Exorcist 3. I think it's a great movie, but it's not a great film. And that's the slight difference. It would never be in the conversation for a Hall of Fame, The Exorcist 3, unless we're talking about great movies where George C. Scott just goes on fucking mental rants because I could watch him shouting at anything. He tends to do that quite a lot. But yeah, this first film is just important in cinema, regardless of horror. It's important to cinema. So had to be here. Number one with a bullet.
Yep. And most of us nominated this film. So it's, I think we all feel the same way about it. And I'm pretty happy to see it winning our number one spot. So
how iconic is that right in the beginning where you have Pazuzu and Max von Sydow like facing off, like in the desert, and that it's just and you see those dogs fighting.
But remember, he's never called Pazuzu in this because Friedkin rightly said that's a stupid fucking name and threw it out. It was only the second film that brought that in from the novel. But yeah, no, it's a truly great scene as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish that the Academy would have had the guts to make this Best Picture in 1973. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Sting, but I think that even though this movie is so well regarded, I just think it deserved, and for the time, I mean, who in the history of the world was there ever a horror movie nominated for Best Picture? I mean, as in 19, especially back then, nothing prior. I mean, Psycho, I don't even know if that was nominated in 1960, but
yeah, other than like Silence of the Lambs, can you think of anything else?
Was the others?
Get Out recently.
The others?
Recently, yeah, the others might have been, Jamie, yeah.
I don't think the others was up for major.
But back then it was unheard of that a movie like this with demonic possession would be ranked among the finest films of the year. It's just unheard of.
It's a very brave undertaking because really they took on the church and they took on ages of religious doctrine with this film. And like as I said, and the thing is, what's ever going on, like in the beginning, was he's with quote Pazuzu or the devil facing each other, and the dogs fighting, and the whole feeling there's evil around us all the time. And once again, they're surrounded by the evil, but really the demons in their mind is their guilt, their loss of faith, the wife fighting with the husband, the divorce things. It's all the stuff that goes on in our lives.
Letting down your mother in Caddis's case, and that remarkable part where the demon uses that line from earlier in the film. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. The sparing a change for an old boy father. That part to let you know that even then, at a little innocuous moment, the devil was watching Father Karras that whole time. Around.
Yep, and no, masterpiece.
Yeah, absolute masterpiece. So those are our 5 inductees. So they will go off to the Hall of Fame shrine. All of our other nominees that didn't make it in, we will leave them open to be nominated again, should we choose to. How we're going to change it up a little bit next year is we're probably going to do some categories next time instead of just one big long list. So we're going to have like categories of types of films, maybe eras of films, that sort of thing. We've got a year to plan it out, but it'll be lots of fun. And of course, we'll open it up to be voted on by you, the audience, once again. But before we leave you, of course, we have some icons to talk about. So these icons, we nominated 1 each. They automatically get inducted, right? These are not being voted on. These are our inductees. These are our Lifetime Achievement Awards, right? So we decided to go with some heavy hitters first time around. Our icons are Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr., and last but certainly not least, Mr. Peter Cushing.
See, boring. That's the way it's supposed to be. No surprises.
That's it.
This is interesting. When I asked everybody for these, I mean, we went to, I mean, these are iconic actors, right? And these are some of their iconic roles. I mean, here you see 2 different Draculas. Here you see the Phantom of the Opera. You see the Wolfman. You see Peter Cushing doing Baron von Frankenstein. And of course, you see Karloff as the Frankenstein monster. These are all iconic characters in horror film lore.
I had nominated Lon Chaney Sr. Yes, Phantom of the Opera, Quasimodo, the Lost Film, The Blind Bargain, London After Midnight, with his, there are some, quote, horror films, we used to call it that. but I got it because of his makeup ability.
Yeah.
Makeup and the stature he had. I mean, he certainly inspired the makeup of characters, which he did it himself, but inspired people like Jack Pierce to just up the ante, up the ante. And as the old rumor has it, nothing was ever signed, but he was trying to be courted. He was at MGM, was trying to be courted to play Dracula back at Laemmle at Universal, and they never really, I think, went beyond other than just maybe some lip service. But he was under contract. But the funny thing about Lon Chaney Sr., had he lived and he'd done Dracula, he more than likely would have been offered Frankenstein, and we probably would never have heard of Karloff and Lugosi. You don't know. There could have been an alternate universe. They never would have given the break they were given. But the main thing was for he inspired makeup, and I think he raised the bar on many levels with that.
Yep.
I think it's very telling that our list is very non what's actually been inducted as films. So the people that we're inducting are very different. And to clarify for people, we inducted these at the same time as our nominations. So we didn't do this in response to the victors, which we only discovered yesterday from Pete ourselves. And we came up with these names weeks ago. So this was not a decision taken as a response to, there's so much 70s and 80s horror on that list, let's put some more early stuff here. This was just an organic thing. But it's very telling that we have the two great double acts, if you will, even if, one of them didn't get on quite as well as the other. Boris and Bella were never the best of friends, to put it bluntly. But they're obviously such an iconic pairing, and of course Lee and Cushing, who were indeed great friends until the very end, to be paired together. And the Cheneys, as much as I have ragged on here about Lon Chaney Jr., when he was great, he was truly great. In The Wolfman, especially, I think is his greatest performance as Larry. I think it's a wonderfully vulnerable and open performance, which plays into his abilities, which didn't always do because he was a jobbing actor. As all these actors were, funnily enough, none of these were actors who could afford to really say no to a lot of jobs. They kind of had to take the money, which is quite interesting too. None of these guys were really in a position to say no to very much, and didn't. So they all have massive filmographies for the period they were
The only one would be Chaney Sr., but he was
he was prolific for when he was alive.
Oh yeah, for the first 20 years he was taking everything, and that's how he developed his reputation.
I mean, I had taken, my choice was Boris Karloff, just because I mean, obviously with Frankenstein, but then it's like the Mummy, the Body Snatcher, the Black Cat, all the Fu Manchu, with all, he was just so versatile and could do pretty much anything. And then even at the end of his career, everybody knows that he's or the voice of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And I think that he was able to do that at the end of his towards the end of his life, and at the end of his career, something that possibly is even more or just as iconic as Frankenstein, that everyone knows, watches, and loves, that every year, that children today can still watch that 1966 cartoon and appreciate and love that narration that Boris Karloff gives for that. I mean, he was just I feel like he could pretty much do anything, even in Targets towards the end of his career, that showed a different, perhaps a different side of him late in the game. So he was my easy pick for the icon.
One reason, Craig, I'm very glad that he's on here is he's the only representative, even from the nominees, who even slightly is related to the Roger Corman whole cycle, which is a massive part of horror history. None of the films made it, so none of us nominated those. But he obviously was in The Raven, and
Terror,
well, kind of the Terror, and then that was obviously reused for Targets. So it's great to have slight early Corman tangent in there as well. I mean, mine was Peter Cushing for very similar reasons, in that no matter what he turned his hand to, the most vile Frankenstein possible, where Frankenstein wasn't just a scientist who got into a bit of a flummox, he was a nasty bastard. And it gets nastier as the films go on. I mean, you have to give a trigger warning if you want to recommend Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. He becomes a rapist in that film. It's truly horrible. But he could also play light comedy. He was in Laurel and Hardy. He was in A Chump at Oxford with Laurel and Hardy back in the 40s. He did Shakespeare with Laurence Olivier, no less. So he was a truly great actor, and he never slummed it. And I can't say the same for everyone on this list. Even Christopher Lee, another great favourite of mine. If he didn't like the film he was in, he would let you know with his performance. Peter Cushing always gave it his best. I have some of the worst films ever made with Peter Cushing in them. And for the 5 minutes that he may be in some of them to give it a bit of name
So great.
value,
He's
he's
still great.
brilliant. And he
You give it
never
your
says,
best. Yeah.
"Fuck this, this is just, nobody's going to see this anyway. I'm not going to try." He still plays it as if it's his greatest role ever, as if he's going to be up against John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson. Wonderful, wonderful actor, and a true gentleman of the cinema as well. And I'm glad he's got a role like Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars that overshadows his career. But at the same time, at least it gives him that legendary status, as indeed I suppose Christopher Lee has with Count Dooku in Star Wars to a slightly lesser extent. But it means they'll at least have some infamy in terms of cinematic history, even for the most casual of filmmakers who only watch things like Star Wars. They'll at least know who Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee are from those.
And Saruman.
And Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And Peter Cushing would be Montarp in Star Wars. A very small role in the first movie, so pivotal, so iconic that they brought him back in an AI form many years later. So.
Yeah. I also feel that Bela Lugosi, who I nominated, always gave his all. No matter, right at the end when he was doing stupid movies like The Bride of the Monster or Glen or Glenda, he didn't know what he was doing in Glen or Glenda. He was just doing what he was told.
Neither did Ed Wood. It didn't stop.
Yeah, either did Ed Wood, but Bela Lugosi didn't know. Sit in this chair and say he gave it his all. And this, and I love Devil Bat. I love all his most iconic things like White Zombie and The Raven and Son of Frankenstein, Murders in the Rue Morgue. But this is the sweetest thing I can say about the guy. Okay, this is a compliment. If he was alive today and an old man,
you'd fuck
and he knew, and if he knew this was going on, I think we could get him for the show. I think he'd come on and he would be honored. He'd do a little speech and he would feel on top of the world because of this stupid little thing. And I think that I don't use the word sweet to describe like dudes, but I think that would be very sweet of him. And I think he would do that.
And his depiction of Dracula, whether it's liked or not, people associate that with, you ask a little kid, it's like, what's Dracula? And it's like, I want to suck your blood, it's like that's from him. I mean, it's not from Max.
Even though he didn't say it,
yeah. But it's
they
like
do his Hungarian accent.
That's what people associate.
Do you know what's interesting to me? And it's a bit of trivia, perhaps, but people also imitate him when they do Frankenstein impressions, because when they do Frankenstein, they put their hands out. That's Bela Lugosi's Frankenstein from later on. When he's blind, he's only doing that because he's blind at that point. Yeah. And it's not Boris Karloff who's playing him, it's Bela Lugosi. So they're impersonating, thinking they're doing Boris Karloff, but they're doing Bela Lugosi again.
Yep.
And let's face it, Karloff and Lugosi together in The Black Cat, that's up there.
Yeah. And we did an episode on our top Bela films, which again is in the archives and well worth checking out because we were all fucking wonderful on that.
Well, I wasn't, but you guys were.
You were busy collecting 4K discs. Come on.
Not back then.
Back then.
He was scouting. Now, what did you pick? I take it you were Lon Chaney?
I picked Lon Chaney Jr. Because I all my other ones I would have picked any of these, and so Lon Chaney was Jr. was my next choice, and I absolutely love his Lawrence Talbot character. Yeah. I'm a huge werewolf fan anyway. I love the Wolfman, and him playing Son of Dracula is okay. Him as the Mummy is fun. Him as Frankenstein monster doesn't really do a lot for me, but him as Lawrence Talbot, the werewolf, the Wolfman, to me is one of the great iconic characters in all of horror. And I just, for that alone, I had to numb. There's others, as we were sitting here talking, who's really missing from this list here?
Vincent Price.
Vincent Price, of course, yes. But there's always next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
You only get 5.
He gets to headline the next year, it looks like.
Yes.
So, yeah. He'll be the
He might
star
be
of the show.
unanimous. He might be our unanimous choice next year, right?
And he would have been on here telling us how to cook fish in a dishwasher because he was fucking weird on chat shows.
Oh,
And,
we're advertising a bug zapper.
yeah, I mean, I
Great
also
commercials.
I like that we've got these guys who are very distinctly Universal represented as well, because one of my real favorite Universals is The Invisible Man. But I wouldn't nominate Claude Rains for this, even though I think it's actually as good a performance as Bella, as Boris, but it's a Claude Rains performance in a bubble, and then it goes off to be Claude Rains, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
Right.
and a million, and Passage to Marseille, and
Notorious.
Casablanca.
Yep.
He's almost above it.
Yeah,
I
he's
don't
not
mean
a
that
horror,
in a
he's not a horror
derogatory.
icon other than
Yeah.
that one film.
Even
I
though
was
that one
thinking
film
of
is.
nominating Hitchcock, but I was like, wait, you got The Birds, you got Psycho. What else do you got?
Frenzy.
Frenzy, I guess. But
Lodger.
still thriller.
Yeah.
Well, no, Frenzy's definitely.
I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't
definitely
argue a
TV
Hitchcock
killer.
nomination at all.
You wouldn't?
No, you've got TV shows. You've got The Lodger. But again, we've got him for next year. We've got Roommate. We've got all the directors. There's great directors of the 70s. that we
Wes
mentioned.
Craven and
Makeup artists. I mean,
Yeah, we've got Jack.
it doesn't stop
Maniacs,
with just, actors and actresses.
Tom
Terrence
Savini,
Fisher,
and
Savini.
We've still got Basil Rathbone and Lionel Atwell, and there's a lot of other guys we have.
Dwight Fry. Whatever.
Yes.
Even
yes.
hey, we could always have a category of best supporting.
Although, if this runs for
We're
100
not going to
years,
get to it all because we're old men. We're going to die and still have
Oh, right.
Davey's going to have to keep it going.
I think
I'm in my
Another
30s.
15
I'll
years
keep the
to live.
flame going. Don't worry.
Yeah. Let's do a
Although-
quarter, just in case,
Just write down some names just in case they're guys. But
Yeah.
Okay, for the future.
So there you have it, everybody. Our first ever Monsters Den Horror and Monster Film Hall of Fame. We've got our 5 winners and our 5
All
icon
had
picks.
tuxedos on.
Yes, maybe we'll do something a little special
Black shirt.
here. But this
it's my business swear. What you
and a
talking about?
beret.
I wear this to weddings all the time.
Yeah. It's like I'm at con.
Yeah.
And we want to thank everybody who took the time to vote. I always like getting the viewers
Nearly
involved.
Except
20
for everyone who
million
voted
votes.
for the Beyond.
Hey, you're the ones that you're the ones that put it in the Hall of Fame.
That's
We
right.
are the perks of picking
So
the
that's right. Don't,
icons.
if you want to moan at anybody, moan at each other in the comments. But if you want to praise people, praise us.
There you go. There you go. And we love the Beyond, but whether it was
Yes.
deserving enough to be in the first.
I have to revisit it.
Yes. I love the story, whatever the fuck.
It wouldn't actually be my first choice, Fulci, to be in, but it was what Chris pulled, and people voted on it.
Oh.
So
It's inspired me to watch it again after X amount of years. So there you go.
There you go. And watch the new 4K. That's what you got to watch.
And then Craig has inspired me to buy.
Craig, go and buy the 4K. That's right.
So thanks for watching, everybody. List your comments down in the down below, Dan, all the way down below in the comment section. And hopefully you enjoyed this. And like I said, we'll be doing this next January. We'll have the episode in February, but next January we'll get all the lists and all the nominations set, and we'll have it out there for you guys to vote on. And we got a year to think about it. So thanks for taking part. This was a lot of fun. And tune in 2 weeks from tonight, where we talk about our favorite comic book adaptations. That's next. Comic book films coming at you. So we're going to deviate a little bit from horror, or maybe some of these might be horror. You never know, because there are some horror comic adaptations that maybe some of us have forgotten about.
So a little twist to that story, isn't it? We're doing our favorite, a great comic book adaptation,
And a
one
shit
that we thought shit the bed, and then one that we'd like to see made.
Like
Maybe
to
it's been
see
done
made.
already, maybe it hasn't, but one that we'd like to see made. So
Yeah.
you'll get a rant, you'll get a rave, and then you'll get a what if. All in one show. You
What
lucky,
if?
lucky people.
What a comic book little Easter egg you put in there.
Like having a comic book menage a trois.
Yep.
Well, that sounds fun. Dan, send me your address and we'll talk about it.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time.
All the
Please
damn
subscribe
time.
if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Congrats to all our winners, and we'll see you next year in 2025 for the next Hall of Fame episode. We'll see you 2 weeks back here on the Monsters Den. Till then, for Dan Brown, Craig Kaminsky, Jamie Laszlo, David Gallagher, and Chris Allo, who's down in Florida. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in 2 weeks here on the Monsters Den.
Don't think we'll get any telegrams from the winners, but regardless.